You wake up tired, not exhausted, not sick, just flat. You slept 7 hours, maybe 8. You even went to bed earlier than usual. But when your feet hit the floor, there's a slight delay. Your brain doesn't fire the way it used to. Your body feels heavier than it should. By mid-morning, you need caffeine. By afternoon, you need more. In the gym, the weights feel the same, but you don't. The drive isn't there. Recovery takes longer. Pumps don't last. Strength stalls for no obvious reason. At night, you're tired again, but wired. You scroll. You think. You replay conversations. You calculate tomorrow before it even arrives. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet thought starts forming. Maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe this is normal. But here's the uncomfortable possibility. What if your body isn't malfunctioning? What if it's reallocating? Because what most men interpret as low energy or burnout, or even low testosterone, often begins somewhere much less obvious. Stress. Not the dramatic kind. Not panic attacks. Not breakdowns. The steady, invisible kind. And here's the pattern interrupt most people miss. Stress is not primarily psychological. It's biological resource management. You don't feel stressed and then your body reacts. Your body reacts, and that reaction becomes your new baseline. Long before you consciously label anything as stress, your chemistry has already shifted. Let's make this concrete. Your body runs on hierarchy. It has one fundamental priority: survival. Not aesthetics, not performance, not confidence. Survival. When your system detects threat, real or perceived, it activates a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is not the enemy. It's efficient, necessary, protective. In short bursts, it sharpens you, increases blood sugar, heightens focus, mobilizes energy, prepares you to act. But cortisol has a cost. It doesn't create energy. It borrows it. And when cortisol rises, something else must fall. In men, that something is often testosterone. Not because your body is broken, because testosterone is expensive. It's a long-term investment hormone. It supports muscle growth, libido, risk-taking, confidence, reproductive function. It assumes safety, stability, future orientation. Cortisol assumes danger. The body cannot prioritize both at full capacity, so it chooses. Now here's where this becomes uncomfortable. Your brain cannot distinguish between a physical threat and a psychological one, an approaching animal, a financial problem, a performance review, a relationship conflict, a notification at midnight. The physiological pathway is almost identical. Heart rate shifts, blood sugar rises, cortisol releases. Your system prepares to survive something. But in modern life, the something rarely resolves. There is no fight, no sprint, no closure, just continuous low-grade activation. And here's the first realization that should land. If cortisol rises occasionally, testosterone dips temporarily. If cortisol stays elevated chronically, testosterone recalibrates downward. Not dramatically overnight, gradually, subtly, enough that you don't notice a collapse, only a slow drift. Energy slightly lower than 5 years ago. Motivation slightly less intense. Recovery slightly slower. Libido slightly inconsistent. Nothing catastrophic, just less. This is where many men make the wrong assumption. They think testosterone is an independent variable, that it rises and falls on its own. In reality, testosterone is context-sensitive. It responds to signals, and chronic stress is one of the strongest signals your body can receive. Let's go one layer deeper. Cortisol and testosterone are both steroid hormones. They share biochemical building blocks. When stress becomes chronic, the body diverts more resources toward cortisol production. This is not poetic language. It's literal resource allocation. If your system believes you are under constant threat, it does not invest heavily in reproduction and muscle growth. It invests in immediate survival. And this trade-off can happen even if you appear outwardly functional. You're still working, still training, still socializing, but internally your baseline has shifted. And here's the micro-resolution that matters. Lower drive under chronic stress is not weakness. It is adaptation. Your body is conserving. That realization should feel relieving for a moment. But it opens a deeper question. What happens when the stress never turns off? Because acute stress is survivable. It spikes and resolves. Chronic stress is different. Chronic stress becomes identity. You wake up already thinking about unfinished tasks. Your nervous system rarely fully powers down. Even rest is partial. You might not describe yourself as anxious. You just describe yourself as busy. But biologically, the difference is minimal. And here's something most men don't connect. Testosterone production depends heavily on sleep. Specifically, deep sleep. Not just total hours, but quality. And cortisol directly interferes with that architecture. Under normal conditions, cortisol follows a rhythm. High in the morning to wake you up. Low at night to let you sleep. Chronic stress flattens that rhythm. Morning energy becomes blunted. Evening calm becomes elusive. You lie down tired, but your mind doesn't shut off. This is not random insomnia. It's hormone timing. And when deep sleep is reduced, testosterone production drops further, which means the very state stress creates, lower testosterone, also becomes harder to reverse because sleep is compromised. This is how a feedback loop begins. Stress raises cortisol. Cortisol suppresses testosterone. Poor sleep reduces testosterone further. Lower testosterone impairs recovery and resilience. Reduced resilience makes stress feel heavier. The system feeds itself. Not dramatically, quietly. And here is the shift you may not like. The body you're experiencing right now is not an accident. It is a response to perceived conditions. The question is not whether you feel stressed. The question is what your biology believes about your environment. Because your hormones are not reacting to your intentions. They're reacting to signals. And if the signal has been threat for long enough, your body will adapt to survive it. Even if that survival slowly costs you the performance you thought you were protecting. And we haven't even talked about what happens next. The loop doesn't stop at hormones and sleep. It moves into behavior. And this is where things become visible. Under chronic stress, cortisol doesn't just suppress testosterone. It alters how your body handles energy. Cortisol increases blood glucose. That's useful in short bursts. You need fuel if you're running or fighting. But when that elevation becomes constant, insulin has to work harder. Over time, cells become less sensitive. Glucose lingers longer in the bloodstream. More of it gets stored, and where it gets stored matters. Chronic stress preferentially promotes fat storage around the abdomen. Not because you're undisciplined, because visceral fat is metabolically active and responsive to stress hormones. So you train, you diet, you stay relatively consistent, and yet the midsection softens more easily than it used to. Feels unfair. It isn't random. It's signaling. Here's the micro-resolution. When progress stalls under high stress, the problem is often not effort. It's internal chemistry resisting long-term investment. But that realization opens a sharper edge. If your body is resisting investment, what else is it pulling back from? Let's talk about muscle. Muscle growth depends on a balance between muscle protein synthesis and breakdown. Testosterone supports synthesis. Sleep amplifies it. Recovery completes it. Cortisol does the opposite. In high amounts, it increases protein breakdown. It liberates amino acids to convert into glucose. Again, survival logic. If your system believes fuel is urgently needed, it will break down stored tissue to get it. That includes muscle. This doesn't mean you suddenly shrink. It means recovery slows. It means soreness lingers. It means gains come harder than they once did. And over months, that difference compounds. Now layer in dopamine. Under acute stress, dopamine can spike. It sharpens focus. But chronic stress gradually dysregulates dopamine signaling. Motivation feels different. Rewards feel muted. The drive to pursue long-term goals weakens slightly. Not gone, just dampened. This is where many men misinterpret what's happening. They assume a character flaw. I'm losing discipline. But neurochemistry is influencing that perception. If dopamine signaling shifts and testosterone declines, your baseline assertiveness softens. Your willingness to take risks decreases. Your competitive edge dulls. Not dramatically, just enough. And here's something most men never connect. Sexual performance is extremely sensitive to stress chemistry. Erectile function depends on blood flow and parasympathetic nervous system activation, the rest and digest state. Cortisol pushes you toward sympathetic dominance, fight or flight. You cannot be in both states fully at the same time. So even if desire exists psychologically, the physiological environment may not support it optimally. Again, this isn't moral, it's mechanical. And the mechanical explanation is important, because without it, men internalize the wrong story. They think something is wrong with their masculinity, when in reality, their nervous system is in survival mode. Here's the deeper pattern emerging. Stress does not just lower numbers on a lab report, it shifts identity. If your hormones change, your behavior shifts subtly. If behavior shifts, feedback from the world shifts. If feedback shifts, your self-perception adjusts. Confidence becomes conditional. Energy becomes rationed. Ambition becomes cautious. The body adapts to the environment you repeatedly signal. And now we reach the midpoint realization, the one that reorganizes everything. Stress doesn't just exhaust you. It tells your biology what kind of life you are living. If your system detects ongoing threat, it reallocates away from growth and toward protection. Muscle becomes less important than glucose. Libido becomes less important than vigilance. Deep sleep becomes less important than readiness. Your body is not trying to sabotage you. It is trying to protect you from a danger it believes is ongoing. And here's the confrontation. Modern stress rarely looks like danger. It looks like responsibility. It looks like constant connectivity. It looks like pressure to perform across multiple domains simultaneously. Your nervous system was built for intermittent threat. Now it experiences continuous stimulation. Emails at night, news cycles, financial calculations, unresolved conversations, endless comparison. Even positive ambition can register as stress if recovery is insufficient. You might say, I can handle it, and in many ways you can. But handling stress psychologically is not the same as neutralizing it biologically. Hormones don't respond to your self-image. They respond to load. And if the load exceeds recovery capacity long enough, adaptation occurs. Quietly, here's the subtle danger. You normalize the new baseline. You forget what sharper energy felt like. You forget what effortless sleep felt like. You forget what spontaneous drive felt like. Because gradual decline feels like aging, but often it's prolonged activation. Now zoom out further. Chronic cortisol elevation also increases systemic inflammation. Low-grade, persistent inflammation affects vascular health. It influences mood stability. It changes how your brain interprets threat, which means the more stressed you are, the more sensitized you become to stress. The loop tightens. Stress increases reactivity. Reactivity increases stress perception. Perception reinforces hormone patterns. And this can unfold over years without a dramatic crash. No single moment feels catastrophic, just incremental recalibration. Until one day you look at your performance, physical, mental, sexual, and it's noticeably lower than it once was. And you can't point to a single cause. That's because it wasn't one cause. It was sustained signaling. Your body believed something about your life, and it adapted accordingly. Now here's the uncomfortable implication. If the body adapts downward under chronic stress, it can also adapt upward under different signals. But adaptation is not passive. It requires interruption. Because right now, whether consciously or not, you are broadcasting a message to your biology every day. Through sleep patterns, through recovery habits, through mental load, through how often you truly disengage. The question is no longer whether stress affects the male body. Clearly does. The question is what direction that adaptation is heading, and whether you're willing to confront what your current baseline is costing you. Let's extend the timeline. Not weeks, Years. Chronic stress does not usually create a dramatic collapse. It creates gradual recalibration. Cortisol remains slightly elevated. Sleep remains slightly fragmented. Testosterone remains slightly suppressed. Inflammation remains slightly higher. Slightly is the key word, because slightly multiplied by years becomes structural. Cardiovascular strain increases under prolonged stress exposure. Blood vessels remain in a more constricted state. Blood pressure trends upward. The heart works a little harder, a little more often. You don't feel that day to day, but your body does. Inflammation, when persistent, shifts metabolic function. It influences how easily you gain fat and how resistant that fat is to loss. It affects insulin sensitivity further. It influences brain function and mood regulation. Again, not dramatically overnight, but steadily. And here is the quiet realization most men avoid. The body adapts to whatever environment you consistently provide. If stress is intermittent and followed by recovery, adaptation builds resilience. If stress is constant and recovery is partial, adaptation builds protection. Protection is not the same as strength. Protection is guarded. Protection is conservative. Protection is energy efficient and growth resistant. Now we move into the decision territory, because once you understand this, you can't unsee it. If your current lifestyle continuously signals threat, your biology will continue allocating resources toward survival. And survival mode has predictable characteristics: lower reproductive drive, reduced muscle investment, impaired sleep depth, elevated abdominal fat storage, more reactive mood patterns. This is not a moral failure. It is a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. But here's the uncomfortable shift. The system does not care about your goals. It cares about perceived safety. You may consciously want growth, but if your nervous system does not feel safe, it will not prioritize it. Now ask yourself something without answering out loud. When was the last time your body truly powered down? Not distracted, not numbed with scrolling, not sedated by exhaustion, but genuinely calm. Deep parasympathetic activation, slow breathing, low mental load, because that state is where testosterone recovers. That state is where deep sleep architecture stabilizes. That state is where cortisol rhythm normalizes. Without it, adaptation remains tilted toward defense. Here's the micro-resolution before we escalate again. You do not fix chronic stress by eliminating all stress. That's impossible. You fix it by changing the ratio between stress and recovery. The body tracks ratios, not intentions. 8 hours of work stress and 0 decompression is different from 8 hours of work stress followed by deliberate nervous system downregulation. Most men optimize output. Few optimize recovery with the same seriousness. And yet recovery is where hormonal recalibration happens. Now let's make this personal. If your energy is 20% lower than it could be, if your sleep is 15% less restorative than it once was, if your drive is subtly muted, over a decade, what does that cost? Not in theory, in lived experience. Less ambition pursued, less physical potential realized, less relational presence, less risk taken. Chronic stress doesn't just reduce performance metrics. It narrows life. It makes you operate slightly below capacity for years. And because the decline is gradual, you adapt to that too. You redefine normal. You stop expecting sharper energy. You stop expecting spontaneous drive. You stop expecting deep, effortless sleep. And this is the most dangerous adaptation of all: lowered expectations. Because once expectations drop, intervention feels unnecessary. This is just adulthood. This is just responsibility. But adulthood was not designed to mean permanent sympathetic activation. Responsibility was not meant to equal hormonal suppression. The male body is built for cycles. Engage, recover, build, repeat. When recovery disappears, the cycle breaks. And when the cycle breaks, building slows. Now here's where the focus narrows. Your body is listening right now to how late you stay awake, to how often you truly unplug, to how much mental load you carry into the night. to whether stress resolves or accumulates. Every day is a signal. You don't get to opt out of signaling. Even inaction sends one. If you continue broadcasting constant activation, your biology will continue prioritizing protection. If you deliberately create genuine recovery, your system will recalibrate. Not instantly, but predictably. Hormone rhythms are responsive. Sleep architecture can normalize. Testosterone production can recover when stress load decreases and deep sleep returns. The body is not fragile. It is adaptive, but adaptation follows input. So here is the tightening of the lens. You can tolerate chronic stress. Many men do. The question is not tolerance. The question is cost. What is your current baseline costing you 5 years from now? 10? Because the trajectory you're on biologically does not suddenly correct itself. It compounds. And here's the final shift. This is not about optimization. It's about alignment. If your external life demands high performance, your internal state must support it. Otherwise, you're fighting your own chemistry. You can push against suppressed testosterone. You can push against poor sleep. You can push against elevated cortisol for a while, but eventually the system wins, unless you change the signal. And that change does not begin with supplements or hacks. It begins with acknowledging something simple. Your body believes something about your life. If it believes you are under constant threat, it will protect you accordingly. If it begins to believe you are safe enough to build, it will allocate differently. The same biology, different message. Now narrow this down to tonight. When you finish this video, you return to your environment, your routines, your habits, your stress load. Nothing dramatic has to change immediately, but awareness changes interpretation, and interpretation changes signaling. Your hormones are not random. They are responsive. So the real question isn't whether stress affects the male body. It does. The real question is, what future is your current stress pattern preparing you for? Because whether you adjust it consciously or not, your body is already adapting. If something in this video resonated with you, if it challenged you, strengthened you, or gave you clarity, take a second and hit the like button. That small action helps this message reach more men who might need to hear it. And if you're committed to becoming a stronger, healthier, more self-aware man, subscribe to the channel. We release content consistently to support you on that journey. You're not alone in this. I'll see you in the next video.